We begin in Johannesburg. South Africa is hours away from hosting a landmark moment, the first ever G20 summit on African soil. The host nation is pushing a strong agenda of global solidarity, climate action and debt relief for developing nations. World leaders, including Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, UK PM Keir Starmer, leaders of China, Vietnam, the European Union and heads of government from across the world are beginning to land in the country. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called it a particularly special summit, underlining that various global issues will be discussed under South African stewardship. But even before the beginning of the G20 summit, the biggest talking point isn't just the agenda, it's the American absence that has cast a shadow over the summit. Washington has announced that it will not participate in the G20 summit this year. President Donald Trump has justified the decision by accusing South Africa of human rights abuses and repeating discredited claims that white Afrikaners were being targeted in the country. Washington's absence is now at the centre of a new diplomatic spin. That's because South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said that the US has signalled a possible change of mind, indicating Washington might now participate in one shape or form at the summit. He called it a last-minute communication that required practical discussions on what that participation would actually look like. However, shortly after, the White House shot down the possibility of its G20 attendance. A US official called any suggestion of attending the summit as fake news, insisting that the United States is not joining G20 talks and will only send an envoy to the formal handover ceremony, when South Africa will pass the G20 presidency to the US at the end of the summit.
We have received notice from the United States, a notice which we are still in discussions with them over, about a change of mind about participating in one shape, form or other in the summit. So the discussions are still ongoing. This comes really at the late hour before the summit begins.
The United States is not participating in official talks at the G20 in South Africa. I saw the South African president running his mouth a little bit against the United States and the president of the United States earlier today, and that language is not appreciated by the president or his team. The ambassador or the representative of the embassy in South Africa is simply there to recognize that the United States will be the host of the G20. They are receiving that send-off at the end of the event. They are not there to participate in official talks, despite what the South African president is falsely claiming.
But Washington's comment prompted a firm counter-statement in Pretoria. The South African president's spokesperson made it clear that the president will not hand over to an envoy, signalling displeasure at any downgraded US presence. And President Ramaphosa himself had warned earlier he does not want to hand over the G20 presidency to an empty chair, but added that it may end up being exactly that. Meanwhile, final preparations for the summit are underway across Johannesburg. Security drills, route sanitisation and last-minute infrastructure checks are running through. The social summit, the civil society wing of the G20, has already begun, packing thousands of delegates into Johannesburg's massive expo centre, showcasing cultural performances and calls for grassroots voices to be included in global decision-making. As the first G20 meeting in Africa opens, host nation South Africa hopes the summit will reflect the priorities of the Global South on climate resilience, fairer financing and debt justice. But the US boycott and now the back and forth over a possible late shift has already shaped the political atmosphere. For now, Johannesburg is setting the stage. The leaders are on their way and the world is watching whether Africa's first G20 summit can deliver unity even with one empty chair in the room. And for more on this, we have with us Thokozile Madonko, a researcher at WITS University, joining us live from Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, and good day to your viewers.
The US boycott situation has taken another turn. We heard those comments. But now, as world leaders are arriving in South Africa, how distracting is this back and forward, given the summit's close proximity?
It's unfortunate that the United States has decided to take this stance, particularly because it reflects badly on the United States in relation to the fact that this is the first summit taking place on African soil. And so it is critical that global leaders show solidarity to South Africa and to Africa to show that this is about the G20, not just President number one, for example.
Yes, and let's look at that, of course. This is the first G20 summit being held in Africa. How significant is that for the continent?
It is incredibly significant. It presents a major opportunity for the Global South and Africa in particular to shape global rules, but only if this delivers real reforms and protects civil space and ensures transparency around key issues on the climate, on debt justice, on equality, infrastructure, technology, and so forth. But given the current fractured nature of the global environment, I think the chance to shift global governance towards a fairer system is a really good opportunity for Africa to gain visibility and diplomatic influence, particularly because things are so fractured and because there is a very fine environment in relation to kind of multilateral global values and so forth. And this presents Africa being able to help set the agenda for really moving beyond sort of individual, protectionist ideas towards a far more greater collaboration around key areas such as debt justice, fair financing, and climate justice.
Yes, and to finish, given the priorities of the Global South, how do you see the presence of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the summit amid strengthening ties between India and African nations?
Well, we know that South Africa and India have a long-standing partnership and shared anti-colonial history, and they cooperate on a number of platforms, for example, BRICS, G20, G77 plus China, and align on a multilateral reform, especially on the UNSC and global finance. So we have strong economic and trade relations and investment and business links. And so in line with our people-to-people ties as well, there's a large Indian diaspora in South Africa. We have strong cultural links through food, film, music, religion, and we have growing intellectual, academic, and educational exchanges. And this collaboration on climate finance, health diplomacy, and technology really enables both countries to serve their individual interests, but also to have joint advocacy for a fairer global economic order. And it's important that both parties are available to be able to pursue some of the core issues that the summit is going to be addressing, particularly on the cost of debt, cost of finance, cost of capital, and in particular around climate change and adjusting to the needs of a growing need for renewables and more ecological ways of pursuing food sovereignty for all involved.
Absolutely. The world's eyes, of course, will be on Johannesburg this weekend. Thokozile, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing that insight.
Thank you very much.
I was a revolutionary. I became a ruler. I claimed to protect my people. I terrorized them instead. I built palaces. I started wars. I lost everything. Some called me a defender of Arab pride. History remembers me as a dictator. Who am I?